Hey folks, welcome back to our Scamp Life. This is part 2 of our Scamp buying guide. So if you're looking at buying a Scamp or really any fiberglass style, egg style camper, a lot of this stuff will transfer over to any of those brands. But we're talking Scamp specific here today. So if you haven't seen part 1 already, pop on over, see part 1, because part 2 gets into a little bit more of the nitty gritty stuff. It's kind of what we've learned and we wish we had known before buying a Scamp. So check it out. So the first thing to know if you're going to buy a fiberglass shell camper, I think the camera's picking it up okay, you can see those little black lines. Now we have waxed the camper so they will come off eventually with some very light cleaning. You can kind of see where I was rubbing my finger there. But because it's fiberglass, you are going to have maintenance, maybe a little bit more maintenance with it than a, I don't know, I guess you'd call it a traditional style camper. So just keep that in mind. At least once a year, give it a good wash and wax, and it'll keep it looking new. I had a video that showed me waxing it and stuff, and it really doesn't take a long time. So if you're curious about that, check out that video. Another thing to know about a Scamp camper, again, they're all fiberglass, and generally the cabinets on the inside, I know you can order a deluxe version of any floor plan, basically, of the Scamp camper, which will be wood cabinets. But my question to that is why? You've just got more maintenance, you got more things that can get wet or moldy or soak up moisture of any kind. So why? Fiberglass is virtually indestructible and it's great. But the one thing with that is that surfaces tend to be a little smoother, a little slipperier. So some things, sticky things will stick to it, you know, that you want to keep stuff in place with, like those command strips. We use a lot of command strips, but what we found is that the basic command strips don't hold things very well, or at least not as well as they should, because the surface is smooth, shiny, it's fiberglass, right? So just keep that in mind if you're looking at putting stuff in your camper long term, like we are. You're going to have to spend a little bit of extra money and get the little bit nicer or the little heavier duty, more sticky command strips if that's how you're going to do things. So I've been walking around trying to find the next thing that I know that we were told to look for when we're looking at a Scamp camper, and that is cracks in the fiberglass. Cracks can happen if the camper has rolled over or been in an accident, or maybe somebody just was driving recklessly with it. But little cracks can happen in the clear coat on the camper itself. And they're just little cracks, usually around a door or a window. And I've been looking around. We got really lucky. Ours doesn't actually have any stress, any of those little, I think they call them spider web cracks. It doesn't appear to have any of them on our camper, which I'm very, very, very happy about. But if you do see those like around windows and stuff like that, don't be too alarmed by that. That just happens in the finish, and a lot of times you can buff a lot of those out even. But if you see big major cracks that you can stick a fingernail in and really pick away at, that might be something to be concerned with. So just check those things out. If you're looking at a Scamp camper secondhand, don't be afraid to test everything. Have them hook up a hose to the water system. Make sure that there's not any apparent leaks. If you can, plug into some sort of electrical, test all the lights. Even if it's just a burnt out bulb, a lot of times, you're not quite sure. Did a mouse get in the electrical part? Who knows? But if something is out, you can at least know that ahead of time, and you're not having to fix that while you're at your campsite. You can fix it while you're at home. But just double check everything. Turn the air conditioner on. Make sure it's blowing cold. All the electrical, check the gas lines, all that stuff. I know that all of this sounds pretty obvious, but when you're out there and you have the owner following you around, looking at every little thing that you're looking at, it can get a little intimidating sometimes. But don't be afraid to look over it with a fine-tooth comb, because odds are you're going to be dropping a few $1,000s on something like this, and you want to make sure that you're not going to have a lot of money invested. Another great thing about the Scamp campers is over the years, especially if you find one from the 70s or 80s, people have modified them. And so maybe there's some modifications that are good, but then on the flip side, there might be modifications that aren't so good. So we looked at a camper one time where they had actually used it as like a hunting shack, and so they didn't need electricity. They left they left the outlets in it and all the lights up, but they pulled all the electrical wires, so there was nothing for the mice over the winter, spring, summer, whatever, to get into and eat up. So good thing I asked about that. He said, no, I just run an electrical cord outside if I needed it, but he didn't have that in the description. So I'm really glad I asked that. Make sure that your furnace is working. Turn the furnace on, make sure it starts up. That's a great way to check your LP lines. If they have a LP tank, ask them before you leave your house, do you have an LP tank that's got some fuel in it? And if they say they're not sure, it might be worth investing in an extra one or just grabbing the one from your grill. And if you're looking at an older camper, check the tires. You actually want to look inside the treads, so in there, and make sure that there's no cracks in there. That can be a sign of dry rot on the tires. They might look really nice on the outside, but they might actually have some dry rot. Again, we got real lucky. This has been stored inside, off of the ground actually, during the winter, and it turned out to be just like brand new tires. So also, just like your regular running tires, you want to make sure that your spare tire is also in good condition. If they're both, or if they're all three original tires to your camper, if one is dry rotted, I would just suggest replacing all of them. But this is another thing that you want to make sure ahead of time before you leave for the road, that you have a good spare tire just in case. So take this cover off. It just lifts off pretty fairly easily, or not fairly easily, I guess it's elastic, but it'll come off eventually. And check out that tire also, and just keep checking the tire pressures every time you go for a trip. Another thing that we learned to check for are all the weld points on the frame. Make sure that there's no weird cracks on any of your weld points, things like that, anything that's been added after. Just make sure that the structure that your camper is going to be riding on is going to be safe for you and your family. And you can check all this equipment up here too. Just make sure that everything works. Another thing that you're going to want to check is just make sure that your refrigerator is working. So again, you can plug it in, push that little green button to the on position, and give it about 30 minutes. So that's usually was the first thing that I would do, is I would plug in the camper when I was looking at one, and then I would turn on that on switch, and then I would run through the rest of the checklist and just kind of double check on some of that stuff. Another little handy tip that we learned was to get your trailer nice and level when you're at home, and then get a couple of these just sticky little levels that are on here. When you get out to the campsite and you're ready to level everything up, it just makes the job a lot easier than having to dig out the magnetic level. We also have one up near the tongue of the trailer also. And all of your AC and your other vents obviously are up on top. Just make sure that the silicone up there, I would bring a little stepladder with. Just make sure that all the little silicone appears to be still pliable a little bit and not falling off when you touch it, because that could save you from some pretty major leaks.
So hopefully these 2 buying guides help you find your dream camper.
Thanks guys. We'll see you on the next video. God bless.